making sure I do that. So as I said, this was, I like to say, a new space for the Food Council in 2024 because we established a working group and we more intentionally were involved in learning about food waste prevention, and food recovery here in Montgomery County. But I think the reason that it was able to be a new space for us is because it constantly came up in other spaces, whether that was our work with food assistance providers, whether that was just deeper dives into food insecurity, or whether that was talking to farmers as well. I think it is something, the food waste and food waste prevention space and recovery is something that constantly came up. So when Carol and Kelly, who are both on the call, towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, um, talked to us about the potential of, taking this on and really making it one of our priorities, we thought it really fit because although we hadn't done deep dives, it constantly showed up in other spaces we were working on. So 2024, being a newer space for us, was kind of our year of exploration and education. This is an unfunded part of our work, so we wanted to really use this year to kind of to build a base, to build a community, and to really learn more about what our role potentially could be, what is going on already, and where we can fill gaps and identify gaps for those here in Montgomery County. So I just wanted to kind of run through some of the things that we were involved in 2024 when it comes to food waste and recovery. We started the year off with, which we'll be starting again next month. We start the year off, with our Maryland General Assembly starting in January and kind of taking off in February. And for the Food Council, that usually means submitting testimony on several bills. So this year, and I'm dropping our public policy tracker into the chat so you can see, it will have all of our policy action, but includes two bills specifically, HB 1318 and HB 0163. Both of these bills were introduced at the Maryland General Assembly in 2024, and were focused on food waste diversion, solid waste reduction, and overall improving the landscape in the state of Maryland. So this was statewide and not a local focus, but we felt it was an important space. So the Food Council submitted testimony in support of both of those bills. HB 0163 was kind of folded into HB 1318. Neither bill passed through the General Assembly in 2024, but we are expecting more bills like them in the upcoming General Assembly session and hope to be involved in that space again. So it is something, again, we've even stronger testimony going forward. In terms of how we actually met and connected this year, we hosted, this is our fourth event, but kind of what I say, third convening. We hosted a kickoff meeting in, I believe, March or April, and it was more of an idea gathering meeting. I know a lot of people on this call were involved, and the idea was to use it as a space to learn and to grow more than anything. So that was where we kicked off the year. In, I think, June or July, I forget, because it was like 105 degrees out there and everyone was sweating like crazy. We hosted a site visit at hosted with a compost crew to learn more about on-farm composting. So a very, very different topic than today, but really trying to get the holistic view of what the food waste prevention and food waste recovery system looks like. So we were able to take a tour of an on-farm composting facility and host conversations with several people at the state and local government to figure out what are the next steps and how do we expand this for other farms, or how do we expand this for more folks in the county. It was a great opportunity. It was awesome to be able to get on site. I thank anyone who was there that day in the summer, because it really was, I think, like the hottest day of the whole summer, and it was a little brutal out there, but it really was a great educational opportunity. And then we also had the opportunity to host with Manna Food Center and Compost Crew a happy hour focused during Food Waste Prevention Week, which was, again, more focused on kind of building community, not, too educational or anything, but just connecting with partners and getting our name out there in this space. During that event, we were joined by County Executive Mark Ehrlich, excuse me, who declared a proclamation for the county for Food Waste Prevention Week. So I'm actually going to drop that into the chat as well, that document that the county executive provided for us as well. So proclaiming that April 1st through April 7th, 2024 is Food Waste Prevention Week. And we hope to be able to do that again in 2025 because it is something that continues to come up and something we hope to continue participating in. A few of the other things we were able to do this year in this space was just to work on collaboration. So understanding who else is out there, what other organizations are doing this work, and how to connect with them to learn together and to collaborate on work. We don't want to feel like we're pushing people out or trying to do this work all on our own. We want to be part of a bigger movement to improve this infrastructure. So we have collaborated with Bethesda Green. We have learned from ReFed. We have recently, in the past week, actually just been approved to join the Zero Food Waste Coalition. And the whole idea behind this, again, is to work in community. This is not siloed work, and we don't think we can solve this problem all on our own, but we're happy to be in community with those that are continuing to make progress. We also have joined, between myself, Carol, Kelly, and Michelle, who can't be here today, we have joined many different calls and webinars and different educational opportunities to build on that foundation. One I want to highlight, and I'm also going to share the resource for that, is the EPA's Food Too Good to Waste peer network call. This peer network is, as I said, is led by the EPA, and it's to convene state and local governments who are working to reduce food waste. And it links the Food Too Good to Waste guide and toolkit, which I just dropped into the chat, as kind of in practice and having conversations about how to advance those goals and whatnot. And the other thing we have done is we are continuing to look for ways to find funding for this work, exploring grant opportunities and diving into those conversations with others about how to improve our work and build in 2025. And with that, I also say that we welcome any ideas and any input that folks have. I have a little survey at the end where folks are welcome to add any input of ways we can be more involved in 2025. But one of the biggest ways we were able to do this work is through the help of Noe. So Noe, who is going to be presenting with us here today, I'll let him introduce himself, but is worked on his AU practicum with us and was able to do some research to better understand the food recovery infrastructure here in Montgomery County. Before I turn it over to Noe, I just wanted to ask Carol or Kelly, was there anything that I missed there in terms of stuff we covered in 2024? I think I got it all. Seeing a shake from Kelly, I'm going to take that as a good sign that I covered most of it. Carol, did I forget anything?
Well, I would just say that the local food working group sponsored the site visit to the University of Maryland dining service. We also were able to explore food waste prevention and food recovery issues there, and had really insightful lessons learned from the innovative program that they're doing there. So
Yeah,
they were
I
the
appreciate
lead,
that.
but we were also
Yeah.
able to learn from that.
And we still have.
Let me just say, so the other thing I wanted to say, just to amplify what Jack was saying about Food Waste Prevention Week proclamation from Elrich, was very excited that we got that. We're the first municipality in Maryland to accomplish that. And the Food Waste Prevention Week national organization actually uses the photo from our event with Elrich holding the proclamation, and actually it's the Compost Crew folks picture with Elrich as their promo materials. So I'm going to put the link to the Facebook page where you can see that. So thanks.
Yeah, awesome, Carol. Daniela, I see a hand up.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that event that was organized at the University of Maryland, but not in my capacity with the university, but as a personal civilian with the MCPS, I was able to provide a webinar about Food Waste Prevention Week in English and Spanish with children. And I know that I'm not like officially part of this team as a civilian, but now that you are with the proclamation pushing through the county of Montgomery County, I think this will be a great opportunity to link that subcommittee from the MCCPTA Green Schools subcommittee of parents of all those 220 schools that, they want them greener with this group, so that for next year, that will be something with more visibility and just with the support of this, the Montgomery County Food Council. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd be happy to support that going ahead. And if you have a recording or any resources, all of the things I mentioned, I'll be adding resources and our notes if it's from a meeting into the follow-up. So if there's anything you'd like me to share in the follow-up, feel free to just send it over and I'll make sure it gets into the email that goes out later this week also, Daniela. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And so on the note of the University of Maryland, NourishNet did a bunch of work. And, you know, like Anika here, we have several members that are part of our board. I'll be happy to also provide the website of NourishNet, which is finally up and around. And we did produce a couple videos that are related to food labels. And, you know, the funding up to now, it's ongoing for next year. So that will be a lovely resource to share with Montgomery County, as Montgomery County already has ManaFood sent them with the same system and partner in software that we are using or partnering with. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. And yeah, feel free to drop things in the chat. And like I said, anything else that you'd like in the follow-up, you're welcome to email over to me. With that, I want to turn it over to Noe and let him take his time and present to us some of what he's done over the past few months and explain his research that he has done while working with us. I also want to say that it has been such an honor to work with Noe and so awesome to get to know him and work with him. And a big thank you to Joanna, who I see here as well, for introducing us and allowing us to work with him and really help our work. And we hope to not just work in a vacuum and after this call say, no, he's done and it's all good to go. We hope to really build on this research and grow from it and help it build on that work in 2025. So Noe, over to you.
Hi, Jack. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so I want to introduce myself. My name is Noe Doherty. I am a graduate student studying international development at American University. I have studied food security and housing for the past 2.5 years at the university, while also working for Professor Mendelsohn. I reached out to the Food Council with Professor Mendelsohn to see if I could do an independent study with the Food Council understanding edible food waste and recovery within Montgomery County, especially amongst food assistant providers. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. So for my research, I kind of started with a pretty fairly traditional way of posing a research question to help guide my method and research process. I wanted a fairly broad question that guided me, but allowed me to explore the different areas within the food waste arena. Thus, I settled on something that limited myself to food assistant providers within Montgomery County, and questions that helped me explore process, size, food types, and what the Food Council specifically can do with that kind of information, especially as a policy and advocacy-centered organization. So before I start, I want to provide a little context. During the 2021 legislative session, the Maryland General Assembly passed House Bill 264, which would require certain persons that generate food residuals, including food assistant providers, to separate said residuals and divert them from refuse disposal systems. In essence, the passage of SB 264 wanted to limit the amount of food and food scraps that ended up thrown away and in a landfill. I wanted to see how food assistant providers, or FAPs, were understanding what they could do and what they were doing to stop food from other entities like restaurants and caterers who don't have to adhere to State Bill 264 from going to waste as well. So to do that, I interviewed 4 different organizations, all of them food assistant providers, 1 large-sized, 2 medium-sized, and 1 small-sized, and 3 different professionals within the industry to help guide my questioning for those organizations. I understand that it's a pretty small sample size. However, it's mainly due to time restraints, but I hope this could be a jumping off point for other researchers who may want to work with Montgomery Food Council in the future. Due to the small sample size, I used thematic analysis to ensure the integrity of the interviews, because coding the interviews for quantitative analysis wouldn't have led to very tangible results that made much sense. Even with the sample size, though, I feel like there were pretty relevant and shared themes. So for my questions, I kind of pushed each question under 3 categories: to understand process and understand the food assistant provider, their logistics, and their food sourcing. food waste and what ways the food assistant providers waste or how they prevent waste and participate in food rescue, and other organizations that food assistant providers are working with within the county. So as an example, I want to kind of talk about what food rescue within Montgomery County looks like. I'm using this example just because I literally saw it happen while I was conducting an interview with an assistance provider. So for apples, many tons of apples might be grown throughout the country, including in this case by a farmer in West Virginia, and then posted on FarmLink or Farm to Food Bank to be distributed throughout the country. A large-sized food assistant provider, in this case in Montgomery County, would claim one pallet of apples or multiple pallet of apples on the different apps, whether it be FarmLink or Farm to Food Bank. And then those apples are delivered often to their warehouse or cleaning room. From there, the apples are separated into smaller amounts, which are posted on ChowMatch for small food pantries and community organizations to be matched with. From that point, volunteer food runners and small organizations pick up a certain amount of apples designated by ChowMatch or the food assistance provider, and the small organizations distribute those apples for free to community members, whether it be at a senior home, an after-school program, or a food pantry. I want to highlight this isn't the only way food is rescued, quite the opposite. Other organizations have email distributions that send out opportunities for small organizations to pick up food or other items. Smaller food pantries have bins outside their collection areas, or they also partner with grocery stores and restaurants to receive unused produce, especially. Some organizations use bulk rescued foods to host drive-through distributions, and this was especially common with grocery stores specifically. Groceries provided the majority of rescued foods to organizations that I talked to. I want to pay particular attention to FarmLink and ChowMatch because this is the biggest way that Montgomery County has promoted solving the food waste idea or promoted food rescue. As we all know, the county has given a couple of grants for the community food rescue, and these two processes are used alongside that grant. So what did I find through my interviews? First, I want to talk about 2020 and COVID-19. They were game changers for Montgomery County. Need went up, people's want to volunteer went up, and the creation of organizations increased. At the same time, according to my interviews, funding went up, especially when it came to service-oriented organizations like food assistance providers. This meant nonprofits for the past 4 years have had the resources to innovate and figure out new ways to grow, distribute, and prevent food from going to waste. Drive-through car-based distributions grew, and after the pandemic, so did choice pantries. For reference, a choice pantry is a type of food pantry where individuals can select items they want to take home from a selection of available food, similar to shopping at a grocery store. Rather than receiving a pre-packaged bag of groceries, essentially giving clients the choice to pick the items that best suit their needs and preferences. Many of these distributions used rescued food, especially produce, either from grocery stores or from farms. This had real positives for affected populations. Various programs could rely less on traditional food sources like Capital Area Food Bank, whose distribution processes, especially for raw produce, have changed substantially over the past 4 years. This also meant that many organizations have started to bleed over when it comes to reaching out to ask to grocery stores for food donations. So although this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just an observation that perhaps it could be an area of research regarding grocery stores in the county. Prepared foods are the least rescued item within the county. From catering to restaurants to other food businesses, it seems that organizations within the county haven't had much success with these foods. Food assistance providers stated multiple reasons for this. First is that it is hard to rescue these kinds of foods. A massive bin of prepared scrambled eggs can't be rescued if one spoonful has been taken out to serve customers. At the same time, food assistance providers usually have scheduled times to distribute their foods, ranging from something like 3 times a week to only once a month. Prepared foods don't necessarily last that long. Finally, there hasn't been much activity from restaurants on ChowMatch. According to interviewees, this may indicate unwillingness to risk the donation from the restaurant side, even though state and federal law don't lay liability on donators for donating prepared food. This could be another avenue of research for restaurants and private food businesses in the county for the council. One other finding is a dissonance between what's happening with State Bill 264 and what could be the most efficient way to deal with food waste for food assistance providers. It should be noted that there are plenty of ways that State Bill 264 allows for continued compliance without composting, and many food assistant providers aren't necessarily having trouble with going through with ensuring compliance. However, what happens in the future if the law is tightened and requires more strict adherence to composting or food waste diversion? Regarding the results of my questions on wasted food from the various food assistant providers, the best practices on whether or not food was spoiled and was sent to a compost was very much reliant on whether that food assistance provider had enough volunteers to process and clean the food for composting. So, for example, stripping cucumbers from packaging, trying to figure out which tomatoes within a pallet aren't rotted, or opening up 1,000 strawberry clamshells and taking those strawberries out to compost them takes time and resources away from being able to package food for county residents instead. Dumping from grocery stores doesn't seem to be a large issue with food assistance providers. I will say this is for the food assistance providers that I interviewed and not necessarily representative of all food assistance providers. It seems that education and working partnerships have allowed them to help groceries understand what can and cannot be rescued. Further, the food assistance providers are willing to tell chronic dumpers that no, we won't take your donation, especially if they see a pattern of dumping. So what can Montgomery County Food Council do to help? First, I recommend, and I know this sounds really cheesy, but it is true that the Food Council is perhaps one of the only organizations that almost all of the food assistance providers in the county trust and view as a neutral arbiter. With that could come the idea of helping build a bit more trust in communications between organizations. One specific reason for this is because it could really help reduce waste that food assistance providers may have. Each FAP has different days and places where they work and distribute. And if they need to quickly offload a prepared food item that could be great to distribute, they could call up the pantry down the street if they were in contact with them. Alternatively, an example that was given by a food assistant provider I interviewed was where a school called to ask that organization to provide food for new immigrant families. When they pulled up, 2 food assistance providers were already distributing food, and another FAP pulled up right behind them. The food had overbooked on the different organizations they had called, and it ended up wasting time, money, and resources for the provider. If the providers had each known that they were coming to that event, they could have selected just one food assistance provider to go, or filled in each other's gap on food types based on what they had available and was in their warehouses or pantries. Another idea could be for the Food Council to ask food assistance providers which groceries and businesses they are already rescuing from, and map those answers for all of Montgomery County. I understand that this is a huge ask. However, it doesn't necessarily require specialized work skills. Using interns or researchers from various universities that offer credit might be a good way to push through this project. This could help the food assistance providers and the Food Council understand where food opportunities and rescue opportunities lie specifically. The Food Council could also start outreach to restaurants and private businesses within the county regarding food rescue. You're in the perfect position to help educate business owners on liability laws and at the same time connect those owners with the closest food assistance provider or to the various rescue programs that the county does, like Chow Match or FarmLink or Farm to Food Bank. Finally, I believe that the Food Council could help with planning the next steps for preventing food waste or help with compost and other ways to handle food waste. For example, Every organization I asked had a different way that they were thinking about composting. Smaller orgs were thinking about local compost ideas, while Compost Crew and the county's own commercial food scraps recycling program were being used by larger food assistance providers. The Food Council could help research the best ways for food assistance provider to compost based on size. With that, I also just want to thank the various organizations I interviewed. Your time was extremely valuable, and I really couldn't have done this without you guys. I also want to thank Professor Joanna Mendelsohn-Forman for her advisement on this project and her support throughout the semester. Thank you again. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you so much, Noe.
Yeah.
Yeah, as he said, any questions, feel free to either drop them in the chat or folks can go ahead and come off mute as well. I have a question or two, but I will wait to see if anyone in the crowd does first.
And also, if you want to ask me questions privately, you're more than welcome to email me. I can drop my personal email in the chat as well.
Go for it, Serge.
Good afternoon. Noe, thank you for your very concise and very comprehensive presentation. It was much needed. I do have a question about the better communications or mapping that the Food Council can do. The Montgomery Food Council does mainly mapping just who's doing what, as far as food distributions and places to go to. Do you mean that they should map for people that actually specialize in food waste and food rescue?
So I think maybe I should probably highlight a lot of the various food assistance providers in the county are doing food rescue, like a majority of them. So in this case, what I'm suggesting is that the Food Council reach out to the various food banks and food pantries throughout the county and see where they're getting that food rescue from. So that way,
I agree
each
with that.
of the food assistance providers could understand which grocery stores are already taken or already used, and which ones aren't being rescued from already. I think this could be really helpful specifically for private businesses as well. If there is like a specific area that a food pantry is already doing a lot of food rescue from, businesses could know to like, hey, call that pantry up and start donating, or at least call that pantry up so they know how to use ChowMatch.
Did you run across any zip code areas within the county where there is the highest or lowest activity of people engaging in food rescue?
No, just because I wasn't necessarily, my sample size was way too small. I
Understood.
only was able to go to 4 different organizations just based on time. I only had a couple of months. But I think if you guys were able to kind of like reach out to every single pantry and food bank within the county, you would be able to map out which areas and are specifically already have high amounts of food rescue and which ones don't. Hi, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. What question do you have for me?
So no, a really nice job. I know how hard you worked on this. But one thing in your recommendations for the council, you listed 4 or 5.
Mhm.
Are there priorities among them? Because you just bulleted them, but from what you saw in your research, if you had to focus on 1 or 2, what would be the most important?
I think that depends on what the council's priorities overall are. If it's trying to ensure like better cooperation, then I would suggest trying to do a bit more of the trust building conferences, community calls with the various food assistance providers to try and get more communication. If it comes to food waste prevention specifically, it might be the mapping idea or the idea of trying to figure out what grocery stores are already being rescued from and what grocery stores aren't, as well as reaching out to other kinds of businesses that could provide food rescue, especially when it comes to prepared foods.
Just as a follow-up, to map that, would that, how long would an activity would that be?
Like I said, it's definitely a huge ask. I don't necessarily have numbers, but it could be a great idea if you had like a class uh of interested graduate students that are all taking the same kind of course in food waste management or food rescue, and you wanted to kind of like see what they could come up with. I don't necessarily have a great answer. I will say the Montgomery Food Council has 92 organizations right now listed on their website as food assistance providers. So with that, if it took probably like an hour to each one, maybe 90 hours, and then another 20 to 30 hours for the actual mapping process, and another 20 to 30 hours when it comes to like outreach and scheduling.
And you don't think anybody else is doing this right now, like University of Maryland's sustainability program or the Montgomery College?
I don't know. Nobody that I talked to me about other academic organizations, at least. Nobody I talked to me about volunteer organizations that are doing this specific thing about trying to figure out the picture of what food rescue looks like.
Great. Well, just a question, but thank you. Really nice job.
Thanks, Professor.
I
Um,
just wanted to point to the question in the chat first, Noe, and then we'll go to Pat. So there's one in the chat. It's a little bit up. If you had more time, how would you change your approach, or what would be your kind of next steps? Thank you, Lucy.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I wish I had more time to interview small organizations in particular. So the little tiny local food pantries that might serve 1 to 200 people a month. I want to see what they're doing specifically more. I feel like I had more of a bias towards medium and large organizations. What would be my next steps? I feel like I have a pretty clear picture of like the various things that are happening within the county. I would I would honestly say focus on trying to figure out what the best ways for communication would be between the various organizations, and then what the best ways for figuring out rescuing prepared foods. It just seemed like a massive hole when it came to like what's rescued. Prepared foods just didn't seem nearly on the same level as like grocery stores or farms. So I think those two would be the things. Another thing could be a comparative analysis with other organizations around the country. I tried to specifically look for organizations that did that took in prepared foods, and it didn't seem like there was like one organization that like came out of the weeds. Lots of organizations took up bulk foods or maybe like raw ingredients. DC Central Kitchen does a really great job of that. And then there's a couple organizations in like Massachusetts and Orange County, California that also do that. And then they will prepare foods for various homeless shelters as well. So I think those would be the various things I would want to do next. With that, Patricia, do you have any question?
I don't know that I necessarily have questions, but I do have some input I wanted to share. And I thank you. I really appreciate everything that you all have shared and the efforts you're putting in. Two different areas. One is when you're talking about the mapping, make sure you include Capital Area Food Bank, because they're they connect all the organizations through Feeding America in Montgomery County. So there's a lot of us out there that are picking up at, grocery stores, everything. So make sure they're included. Also, part of that equation when you talk about prepared food is, for some of them, it's the work involved from the restaurant. We learned early on with Community Food Rescue. Sometimes it's that work and them making sure they have space because they have small freezer spaces and they have to freeze it within so much time, right, to get it out. And then actually having an organization, especially if you're talking about one that's feeding people, your shepherd's tables, et cetera, because most of them, they've already planned their menus. They've planned things, because even with us sharing food that we've rescued that they could cook, it would be great. But we can't tell them 3 days ahead when they have to place their order, that we're going to have, a ton of cabbage and greens and corn and all this, right? So the issue becomes, again, the cold storage space to keep the items until the organizations can use them and receive them, et cetera. Those components have to be, noted and included in whatever processes that we're doing when we're understanding, because we've done food recovery and rescue literally from our inception, and that's literally how we thrive from the very beginning. So it's great. It has a lot of benefits. It is a lot of work, and I think people in particular, when you talk funding organizations, they have to understand that it's a lot of work, and you do need staff. We're volunteer. We've been, volunteer forever, but it's just overwhelming the amount of work and the consistency of having, the consistent volunteers to do that, and the documentation that's required. And for us, we do large recovery, so weighing the items and sorting them and finding out how much is dairy, how much is meat, how much is prepared food, etc. It is massive. So we have to be willing to put the investment there, and the logistical systems, the transportation, etc., storage, all of that has to be a piece that we look at. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for your input. Yeah, I 100% agree. Like you said, it is a massive lift with prepared food specifically. And it's hard to kind of figure out where to give that out. If we're looking at something like Shepherd's Table, does Montgomery County have necessarily that many homeless shelters to distribute prepared foods to if it was like extremely quick turnaround needed? Or would Montgomery County need to get those foods out to a place like DC Central Kitchen or something like that? They're all questions that are very, very valid. Elizabeth first, then Daniela.
Yeah, your answer to this might be small sample size, so I get that. But in talking about mapping, did you get a sense of the longevity of the relationships that food assistance providers have with their donor sources? And would a map be more of a point in time exercise, or would it be helpful in establishing where those long-term relationships are?
Really, really valid point. Like you proceeded with, yeah, sample size might be like a big bias here. It seems like it depends on the organization. Some organizations would be like, hey, sometimes this guy comes through, sometimes they don't, sometimes they deliver, sometimes they don't. Other organizations had like long-term contracts that are written memorandums of understanding with grocery stores to deliver on a weekly basis their rescued foods. That would last for years. So it depends on the organization. I would say, like, even if it was a point in time thing, it's still a starting point and a lot of work for one person. But again, if you get like 10 people working on it, I don't think it would be like incredibly difficult to just kind of get that quick information about like who are you getting your food from, and then like putting it on a map so we can at least distribute it to the food assistance providers again so that they can know like, hey, there's a hole here, or like there's a hole there that we can like grow into. Daniela?
Thank you. That was such a great point about the longevity. My recommendation to this group is to invite Kate Urbank from Food Rescue US, because I'm not sure about how you got a chance to see the discrepancy on rescue food, but in my experience as a cabbie, as a rescuer, most of what I got to rescue with that organization in DC was prepared food. And so they might have some best practices to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, for specifically prepared foods, I want to also say that like within prepared foods, there are even categories that are more rescued than others. The biggest category is like baked goods and breads and pastries. There's like so much of that is very quick to go out. But then other stuff that might be more nutritious, like a prepared like tray of like meats, aren't necessarily rescued as often. And that's also because that it's harder to make sure that stuff stays safe for the population that it would be going to. But I really agree with you. Like getting somebody from the national side on food rescue could really help bring in better ideas.
And they have data on how they manage to cover for the cost of the trays itself, because that
Yeah.
has been like a challenge they've overcome. These aluminum trays by the thousands.
Yep.
It's a component. Thank you.
True. And then there are also the fact that like various organizations around the country help businesses figure out tax incentives for donating that rescued food, which could help as well, incentivizing various businesses. Anybody else have any questions?
There
Although I
was
think,
one in the chat, Noe, from Carol.
oh. Is it your sense that there are tiers of food assistance providers where a smaller segment of large ones, CFR, So What Else, Rainbow, are actively producing food recovery directly from donors, and a large share of smaller ones are getting donations from the larger ones directly interfacing with the donors? The answer is that is kind of like what Montgomery County has structured with their like contract with Community Food Rescue and Chow Match. So like Chow Match is there for Mana and various other organizations to kind of help distribute that stuff from large donors. And that can also help with like bulk foods that are donated or like cleaning those foods to make sure that they're like easy to distribute to individual families. And like, yes, that is one way, but it's not the only way. There are other providers that aren't as big as So What Else or CFR or Rainbow that are just getting from like one grocery store or true grocery stores and then distributing produce to their clients as well. But it's definitely like a big way that that is happening. Yes.
Okay, not seeing any hands or, oh, I see one
Oh.
more. Go for it, Carol. No, you're good. Got it in just in time, Carol.
I know. Yeah, so Capital Area Food Bank,
Yeah.
as has been pointed out, is the Feeding America Food
Yep.
Bank, which is the main channel intended through the USDA programming for food recovery. Do you have any, and also for purchased food? Do you have any concept of what share of food recovery is through
No,
Capital Area Food
not
Bank
at all.
versus other organizations? Yeah.
No, I didn't get to work with Capital Area Food Bank. I wanted to stay within the organizations that were in Montgomery County just because I had limited time, limited scope. I do think that's a really, really good question because then we can kind of figure out as well, like what has Capital Area Food Bank already done, especially since they are the biggest player in the region.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you again, Noe, so much. I know people have asked questions, have said it, but just a great presentation. And from my own perspective, it was awesome to work with you and learn from you. And again, this is not in vain. We will continue this work and we will definitely be building on this research as we go forward and continue. And hopefully you can be involved in that also, because this is, I know you've also enjoyed it and learned from it as well. So we will make sure you are always looped in and what the next steps are. You don't have to just go away when this call ends by any means.
Thank you. It was so much fun. I really had such a great time.
Awesome. I just wanted in our last 10 minutes here to share kind of a look ahead to 2025 and a few resources as well that again, in a year of exploration and a year of learning, some of the resources that have really helped me to kind of ground myself, I think, in this space on a larger scale. So first, looking ahead to 2025, as I said at the beginning, we are hoping to find sources of funding for this work so we can grow in this space and grow on the work, the research of NOE. And so we are actively searching for those opportunities and trying to figure them out so that in 2025, when we have a wrap-up presentation a year from now or whatever it may be, that it can be bigger and it can be the next steps. And we can say, look, a year ago, NOE started us off and we were able to take it to this point and we want to look further from there. So that's really the main goal for 2025. A few other things that we're looking out for, as I said, we are expecting more legislation at the state level. So we are hoping to be involved in that, and whether if it fits with our priorities and our policy council and our policy committee to be involved in providing testimony in support of those bills as they come through the General Assembly session starting in January We are always joining calls, and I know we have a representative from the State Food System Resiliency Council, because we know they are also getting more and more involved as they learn more about this, and especially the Distribution and Access Subcommittee has been great about exploring these opportunities more. So we are always happy to connect with them and learn more from them as well. And then finally, in terms of what we're looking at for the future, is just continuing to host meetings, continuing to host site visits, and be able to grow this work in a productive manner as we go forward. Again, we viewed this year as the education stage. I don't think that means we're done learning by any means, but I think it means we can go from not just learning, but trying to really implement what the next steps are in planning for what the future might look like for Montgomery County. In terms of resources, I just wanted to highlight a few that were really helpful for myself when I started learning about this. So some that have prevented, I'm reading the word prevented on the website, that have taught me about what this looks like and what this looks like kind of in practice. So first, I'm dropping in the chat a Preventing Wasted Food at Home resource provided by the EPA. It's a resource that, again, has just been helpful for me in learning more about what this kind of means and what this looks like. Same with this next link I'm going to drop, and all of these links will, of course, be included in the follow-up information as well. So if you miss one or lose one after it's in this chat, do not worry about it. This resource from ReFed about the issues around food waste and why it's such a big issue and why something that needs to be addressed. And then another one from the Natural Resource Defense Council that focuses on food waste reduction as well. So I'm dropping those 3 links in the chat. I'm also gonna drop this into the chat that Shannon just shared with me. Shannon, I am dropping into the chat. Is there anything you would like to add to it? I know you said that USDA is seeking comment, and it's specifically about food date labeling.
Yeah, I would just like to bring it to everyone's attention that after a lot of input from the National Strategy for Food Loss and Waste, that they are investigating specifically about date labeling across the country. And so if you and anyone on this call can provide feedback to this RFI, that would be really helpful in just stressing the importance of understanding what date labeling is. So I also want to say, because this is a recording and I showed up late and I didn't comment on anything, I did show up late. I know I'm looking forward to seeing your presentation. I missed the whole thing. So I'm looking forward to looking at the recording later.
Thanks, Shannon.
Shannon, just a quick question. Is there a deadline on that?
Yeah, I believe it's early February
okay.
3rd. So February 3rd is
Okay.
the date label that when
So
you have to submit by.
Okay, so I will make sure it goes up in the follow-up for this and as well into the Food Council's newsletters as well going for the next couple of months. We can make sure it gets in there as well. Kelly, I saw you drop something in the chat as well. Would you like to say anything or just reading it now? You don't have to, I can read it.
No, I just received a notice from the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council with an update or a note to look out for a January 9th presentation to their Environment and Production Committee by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance on the wasted food reduction and diversion bill. And that's a bill that's expected to be reintroduced this upcoming legislative session in Maryland, and would charge a surcharge on disposal to help fund composting and food diversion projects, including cold storage and other relevant infrastructure needs. So people
Awesome.
may
Thank
be
you for that.
interested in looking for that on January 9th.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we are usually pretty good about sharing FSRC, State Food System Resiliency Council meetings, but in the legislative session, they do come fast and furious with their weekly meetings, so it can sometimes get lost. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Kelly. In our last 5 minutes here, I first off just want to say thank you so much for everyone's time today. I have a really quick poll that I'm just going to put up on your Zoom screen. Mainly just asking if you have any more information to share with us or want to be involved with this going forward. So just 4 really short questions there. If folks could fill those out really quickly, that would be really, really appreciated. And I'm just gonna leave that up for another minute or so as I see stuff. Oh, yep, oh, it actually shows me how many people, and I can wait patiently. In the last couple of minutes, though, because this really is the end of our presentation, I again just want to say thank you so much to Noe, to Professor Mendelsohn-Forman, to Carol and Kelly for really leading us through this work. Noe and Professor Mendelsohn-Forman over the last couple of months, obviously, with this research specifically, and Carol and Kelly for really bringing this to, not to our attention, because I think you both know we've known about this, but really making sure that the Food Council is on it and holding us accountable for continuing to push forward in this work, and making sure we're in a position to utilize those connections that Noe mentioned, that we also see ourselves as a place that is trusted by a lot of different people in the county and different organizations. And we really want to utilize that to improve our overall food system and utilize our connections to make this a better space for everyone. And that includes improving the food waste recovery infrastructure. I know today we didn't talk too much about composting or things like that, besides when Noe had mentioned it, but it's another area we will be diving more into next year and things like that. So we will continue to learn more. Everyone who is on this call, you obviously got my email at some point about this meeting, so you are in our contact list for this working group. It is going to be moved over to, I'm sure several of you, if not all of you, are in another one of our working groups that has a Google group. It is at the end of this year being transferred over to a Google group similarly. So, and that will be an open Google group where anyone can share information. So look out for that. It probably sometimes comes as an invitation. If you don't have a Gmail account, it will be an invitation. If you have a Gmail account, you'll be automatically added before the end of the year. So just be on the lookout for that by the end of the year, and hoping to use that as a space to continue to share information amongst the group and amongst everyone who was able to join us today. Again, thank you all so much for joining us today. I wish everyone, I was going to say a nice day, but it's really just looking out my window, not that nice out. I don't even think I can even try and say it. It's just rainy and wet. But I do really wish everyone a happy holidays and a